Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Louisiana Unfiltered. I'm Kiran Chawla, and we are joined also by our executive producer, Daniel Brown. So, I don't think I have ever hidden the fact that we are new to podcasting. So, there's plenty that we are kind of trying out. We have plenty on deck for you guys in the next coming weeks. So, make sure that you are following our podcast, subscribe. Don't forget to please give us your feedback, be it reviews or even just sharing it with your friends. The more that you guys listen, the more it gives us feedback as to what you guys are liking, what you're not liking, what you prefer. So we are working around what you like from us. And back to what I was saying as to some of the things we're working on, we have some deep dives coming up. We've got plenty on deck, and I am just so excited for what the future brings. Daniel has been working with me on a lot of this. Daniel, do we even want to tease what kind of we're digging into yet?
No, you got to keep them hanging.
Okay, well, then we're just going to keep them hanging. Well, this week, what we're going to do is kind of give you a little wrap up. We've got a lot going on news wise in Baton Rouge. We're going to delve into some of that, including a big arrest in the death of a high school senior, Blakeleigh Weems. We also have in-depth look at the crime special session that just wrapped up, and it's been pretty heated at times, but a lot of people, actually I should say it's heated on both directions. I use the concealed carry for example. You have arguments on both sides. We're going to get into that. Plus, a case is coming up where sentencing is expected for a story that made national headlines. A young lady who died after she literally melted into her couch. Once again, I'm Kiran Chawla, and this is Daniel Brown, and you are listening to Louisiana Unfiltered. Welcome back. Daniel Brown, our executive producer, is joining me for this episode. I want to start with a big arrest that was made Wednesday morning in the death of Walker High School senior Blakeleigh Weems. Unfiltered with Kiran was the first to break this news that the Denham Springs Police Department had finally made an arrest. 31-year-old Sean Robertson, he was charged with negligent homicide, reckless operation, second offense DWI, and several other charges. The arrest comes nearly 2 months since the deadly crash on New Year's Day. Daniel, this was a crash that, in Livingston Parish, it hurt. It wasn't even 1 hour into the new year yet.
Yeah, this one was a hard one. Being from Livingston Parish, it was definitely in my Facebook feed, people talking about it. There were a lot of questions after it happened. And look, I know we've done some extensive reporting, and you've really got to talk to the parents and investigators in the case. And this arrest was one that I think the family has just been unpatiently waiting for. I think that they've been told by police through our reporting. We know that they've been told by police it was inevitable, but it kind of took over 2 months to get to this point.
And I guess, Daniel, let me use this opportunity to kind of explain because ever since the arrest was made, we've been getting messages that, hey, are you going to look into why it took 2 months? Let me see if I can try to explain that. Number one, the wheels of justice turn very slow. And it's easy to say, oh, they're not doing anything. Having been doing this for both of us,
Yeah.
Daniel and I have both been in this for 20 plus years. There, you learn that police cannot tell you every single thing. If they do, they ruin their own case when they go to trial. Correct?
Yeah, and it's sometimes hard because there are a lot of times they'll tell you stuff off the record or behind the scenes, and things are coming, but you want to also protect the integrity of the investigation. As journalists, we're just as invested into the investigation as police sometimes, especially on cases like this where you get to know the family. You see
Yeah.
this beautiful young girl's picture and her future that was just taken away from her, and all these things, and we wanted to move fast too, but sometimes you do have to be patient, and in this case, Kieran, what made it even more complex was they had to kind of reconstruct the crime scene, if you will. They had to reconstruct the crash, and that just took time because Denham Springs Police didn't really have everything that they needed. They had to rely on other agencies, so you're kind of waiting to get on their schedule, if you will, to kind of move things along. So I know through your reporting that that was a big holdup in this case.
It was. And for people who don't understand, you do a reconstruction. What that means is you basically try your best to go back and rebuild that night, rebuild that crash. What happened? How fast were the vehicles going? You pull the data from the vehicles, from both vehicles. So that means Weems's vehicle as well as Sean Robertson's vehicle. And that reconstruction is what gave them a lot of the information. And I guess before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's back up. Daniel, let's kind of set the scene for people who may not be familiar with this accident. So it is 12:40-ish a.m. on January 1st, 2024. Blakeleigh Weems, a 17-year-old senior from Walker High School. She is coming off of I-12 westbound and exiting off at the Denham Springs exit. She
Range
has a
Avenue,
red,
yeah.
yes, on Range Avenue. She has a red light, but police say that she actually, so if you're supposed to stop here, she probably went a little bit further, or I don't know how far. The other person, Sean Robertson, is going north on Range Avenue. So initially we were told she had a red light. She kept going. She was in the wrong. Sean Robertson had a green light, he was in the right of way. However, what the reconstruction report has now shown is he was going over 30 miles over the posted speed limit. The speed limit there, Daniel, is 45 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's a if you've ever driven in this area, it can also be a little confusing, especially at that time of night. It is well lit, but you do have turn lanes. You have those. I'm not sure what you call them. Those little concrete barriers on the roads that kind of prevent you from kind of jumping into other lanes. So because it gets so congested, they've really done a lot in this area to kind of improve the mobility of traffic in that area. So it can be a little confusing, especially if you're going that much over the speed limit in that area because there's a lot of red lights. It's a lot of stop and go. At that time of night, there probably wasn't a lot of traffic, but I imagine New Year's there were more cars than normal out and about. But you have to imagine there weren't a ton of vehicles because I don't believe there were any witnesses to this crash, right?
No, as far as I know, they did not find any witnesses.
And then one of the interesting things you were talking about, Karen, was kind of like putting this crime scene back together, this crash back together, and a lot of the times they do this is for trial, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
only for the investigation, but it's for trial if they ever make it that far, and they need this information to kind of let the jury or the judge kind of set themselves into what was kind of going on. So it's not only critical to any arrests that may have come, but it's also critical for the criminal justice process as it
It
kind of
is.
goes through everything.
And this is normal. This is routine for majority of deadly crashes. The issue is Denham Springs Police does not have somebody who can do it on their own.
Yeah.
So for prime example, state police, they obviously handle crashes. They do have people who do this for a living and work under the umbrella of state police. A lot of agencies do. In this case, imagine when you ask a friend, hey, a friend who's a lawyer,
Yeah.
and you say, "Do you mind looking over this lawsuit for me? It doesn't make much sense to me. Do you mind?" You can't, because they're doing you a favor, you can't keep rushing them. So in this case, Denham Springs Police leaned on the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office to do this reconstruction. That was the holdup that I understand, that the reconstruction, the deputy, whoever is in charge of reconstruction, his priority, of course, is going to be Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office cases first.
And one of
So
the
go
one of the
ahead.
things that we reported on after the crash was the blood alcohol content, and that got a lot of we took a lot of heat, a lot of criticism for that, and I'll just be transparent about that because we knew that alcohol or some substance was kind of involved. We just didn't know who during the initial reporting, and at the time, the way things were worded
Yep.
or the way we got our information, it made it seem like Blakeleigh was the one that was kind of drinking and
Absolutely.
driving. We've later learned that that wasn't the case.
No, in fact, Sean Robertson, his blood alcohol content, Daniel, came back at 0.09. Now, remember, the legal drinking limit here in Louisiana is 0.08. Mind you, that's 3 hours after the crash. So he was allowed to leave the crime scene, actually. And he was injured, but he chose not to be transported. So his mom came and picked him up from the crime scene. Later, and now this is the part where it gets a little murky. Somebody went and drew his blood, and so it was tested 3 hours later. At least that's what the parents told me. And his blood alcohol content came back at 0.09, while Blakeleigh came back at 0.
And it's important to point out that we're getting our information from the parents who claim that police have told them this. So we do want to just clarify that. They also said they need a THC in the system. I
Mm-hmm.
guess, it seems a little odd that he was allowed to leave the crime scene, especially when there was a fatality. That seems like a miss in the investigation. I haven't heard of that happening too many times in fatalities.
No, and I think that's what has a lot of people in Livingston Parish pretty upset. That why was he allowed to leave? That's also what has the parents extremely upset that they found out no seatbelt,
Yeah.
suspended driver's license, and later they learned that it was a DWI and it was actually his second offense DWI. Well, a suspended license alone, you should not be able to just leave the scene.
Yeah.
But those are questions the Denham Springs Police Department has to answer. I don't know the why he was able to leave.
And to play devil's advocate here, I mean, if he was involved in the crash and they ran his information at the scene, that's pretty typical. It seemed like the DWI would have kind of came up that he's like a past DWI offender, that may have would have raised some red flags. So there are some questions that Denham Springs police need to answer about the investigation.
Agreed. Agreed. And they've taken a lot of heat on this case, and I know that they know that.
And the parents, your heart goes out for them. They have been critical, but I will say they've been pretty patient. They haven't really spoken a lot publicly. They've talking to you, talked to you about where they're at and all that. And we got a glimpse of kind of their life post this accident, and your heart just you really does go out to them.
It does. In one way, Daniel, I'm blessed. You and I have worked together for a very long time, that I'm very blessed that so many of the victims' family members feel okay to reach out to me and talk to us. So that in itself is a blessing. But imagine having just lost the love of your life, your own blood, your own flesh, your own child, and then you're about to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
So that alone, it's very powerful to be able to speak up. We are blessed that we were able to tell their story, but in this case, you're right. They've been extremely patient, but the last few days, even when an arrest was pending, your head might understand, hey, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Your heart does not. And that's what they have dealt with. That not only that, they feel that they've been kept in the dark. Denham Springs Police does not feel that way. The
Yeah.
parents feel like, okay, our child was made to look like she was the one who was drinking and driving. And so now we were left to try to fix that reputation. And I think more than anything, that's what hurts them, that they had to sit here and fix their daughter's reputation, and she's no longer even alive.
Yeah, she couldn't speak for herself, and I remember us talking about that after the crash and the language and how what we could have done better in that situation. But we're only reporting what we're kind of given and told, and there wasn't a lot of information, and sometimes that is painful, especially in the very beginning of these kind of things, and they do work themselves out. But at the end of the day, it was her reputation. I think that was a very smart way to say that. And something else that I just reading some Facebook comments and stuff, they're like, well, if this guy was arrested and he's been charged in this case, why don't we see a picture of him? What a lot of people don't realize is that Louisiana passed a law a few years back that prevents mugshots from being
Yep.
given to the media unless it's for certain offenses, but for most offenses, they are, unless it's a violent crime, which
Hmm.
you could argue that this is a violent crime, but unless it's a violent crime, you really don't get that. So
You
that's
don't.
another thing in this case that people are going to have to contend with.
And I'll tell you honestly, Daniel, I went through the entire list, one charge at a time to make sure. Wait, did I miss it? Did I miss it? Negligent homicide is what he is charged with. Negligent homicide is not one of the charges that allows a mugshot release. I also even checked DWI. DWI allows a release if the blood alcohol content is zero point 0.2 or over. His was 0.09. So in this case, no. And that's something lawmakers change that is out of our hand. We can sit here and argue all we want. We catch the media. I will
Yeah.
say, I feel we as media, we catch a lot of hell that we're the ones choosing not to show a face. That's never the case.
Yeah, and in this case is look, the legal process has a lot to play out in this case. So I do think now that we have an arrest, that more information is going to start to come out. I think police are going to be more comfortable with talking about it.
Yep.
They can reveal a little more of their cards in the case as well. So I think this is going to be one to watch. I think this is going to be one that's going to have a lot of consequences, and I think it's going to be one that we're going to see play out here in the next few months.
And in fact, Daniel, like you just said, that now that an arrest is made, police are probably going to be able to speak up a little bit more. I want to actually stress that. So yesterday, the arrest was made on Wednesday, March the 6th. Chief Rodney Walker in Denham Springs Police Department, he did issue a comment today. And a part of that actually does talk about that these investigations take a lot of time to complete thoroughly. And I would like to stress that no matter how fast we would like to get things done, we have to still get it done right, which also means not making a lot of our findings public at the risk of losing the integrity of the investigation, which goes back to what we were just saying.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, if you will, and I think police are still also trying to, put together a more complete puzzle. I know investigators and, through the legal process, it all has to kind of play out.
Yep. And I do want to say that one of the things I really want to make sure we get out of this podcast is Friday, March the 8th is Blakeleigh Weems' birthday.
Oh
She
wow, I
would
didn't
have
realize that.
she would have been 18 years old.
Wow,
So, happy heavenly birthday, Blakeleigh Weems.
wow. Another, here in this case, especially now that we're learning that the suspect is a previous had a previous DWI charge. It kind of goes back to a lot of what's been happening at the state capitol over the last few days, and crime and justice have really taken a spotlight in Louisiana. Concealed carry, permitless concealed carry has grabbed a lot of the headlines, but there is a lot of things that Governor Landry ran on that he's already been able to kind of shove through the through the legislative process and become law. And this week he's been signing a lot of those bills. Some of them won't go into effect for a few months, but there's been a lot of action. When it comes to this, law enforcement special session that's been going on at the Capitol.
Well, and Daniel, you know this, before the governor was sworn in, we actually did a long, in depth report on changing the age of what an adult would be. So,
Yeah,
is 17 considered an adult or not? It was 17 at one time was considered to be an adult. Then they changed it.
yeah.
They changed it to you have to be at least 18 in order to be considered an adult. Now, legislation has passed and 17 is back to being an adult. And we were told while doing our research, it was one of the first things that the governor wanted to tackle when he came into office. And what, not even 2 months in, he signed it into law.
It was one of the first things, he campaigned on this. There were some campaign ads that were on this. And what I think is important to note about that bill is it's 17 regardless of the crime. It doesn't matter what you did.
Yes.
17, you're an adult in the eyes of the state of Louisiana. So, that also, makes certain juvenile justice records available to the public. So something that's kind of been shielded before. So it's not just being charged with a crime. It really does open it up to families in the media in ways that we haven't seen before. But it's safe to say that Governor Landry had a lot of wins at the session. It was that bill. It was the way we execute here in Louisiana. Kind of expanding the death row execution methods, if you will, and that's been a hot debate, especially with the most recent execution in Alabama that got a lot of headlines. Executions have been on hold for many years because the drug that was typically used, it was hard to find. It's hard to find. So states that are death penalty states, and Louisiana is definitely a death penalty state, they're having to come up with new ways to kind of carry out the execution for death row inmates, and we now have some new ways to kind of do that.
And Daniel, when it comes to executions, it's same thing. I mean, be it concealed carry, be it just about any bill, there's going to be controversy on both sides. There's the issue of in Louisiana, I say in Louisiana, probably anywhere in the world, there are those people who believe in the eye for an eye.
Yeah.
So if you are convicted of murder, especially first degree murder, why waste tax dollars and keep you alive for what, 20, 30, 40 years before you're executed? That's one argument. There's the other argument of, well, you do still deserve a life, a quality of life. You're still a human being. And in the worst case scenario, if you were innocent and accidentally found guilty, there we've covered those cases as well.
We have been. And, one of the bills that I don't think has gotten enough attention, this was also something that the governor, former attorney general in Louisiana, campaigned on. It effectively eliminates parole for anyone that is convicted after August 1st. So once we hit August 1st, if you're convicted, you're kind of not eligible for parole. There are a few exceptions, but there are very, very few. The constitutionally required paroles are kind of the only major one. There are a few others, but or if you were sentenced to life as a juvenile, I believe. But for the most part, if you're convicted of a crime after August 1st, there's no parole. And that's kind of what the governor he ran on. He wanted to be the crime and justice governor. And, as attorney general, he says that, part of the problem with crime that he believes is that we let criminals out too easily, right? We give them too many chances. And then we have a lot of repeat offenders. And we've talked about that. And we've covered that issue before. So that's going to be interesting to see if and how that deters crime here in Louisiana.
It will. And I mean, this is a podcast, so we are able to delve into things a little bit deeper. What are your thoughts on that bill?
That's an interesting question because I've been thinking a lot about it. I am someone who believes in second chances. I always have been. I believe that people make mistakes and you mess up. But when you look at really what's going on in Baton Rouge, and I'll include New Orleans in that, and we see a lot more crime than most people just because of the nature of what we do. There's a lot of people we cover have done this before and they keep getting arrested.
Yes.
There was one case last summer that it sticks out to me. It was someone that was arrested on drug charges, and basically he was running a drug house, and it was a big fentanyl bust that they done. And looking back on his rap sheet, and he's been arrested over and over and over again, and he keeps getting out and repeating the same crimes. You know, I, I don't feel sorry that's the case. Like I'm glad. I want him behind bars. I want him in jail. I want my family safe. I want to be safe. And police have said over and over, and we've talked to a lot of police, and I'm not sure if the new police chief has touched on this or not, but I know a lot of other police have, and they applaud this, quite frankly, because they firmly believe that majority of the crimes are committed by people who have committed other crimes before.
Repeat offenders. Yep.
And it's
Yep.
a big
And
problem. It's a
it
problem.
is. But I feel like that's a much bigger battle as well because it's also the judges. Judges have to be held accountable as
I was
well.
going to
They're the
say, yes.
ones who keep letting people out. I mean, we're working on so many stories where it's like a person is convicted of murder, yet they're out.
Yeah,
And while they're out, there's another murder.
there's another murder. Yeah. And, so part of you thinks that maybe this will deter someone, that maybe it's their first crime they committed, but maybe it'll deter them. Maybe it'll make them think twice. You can only hope. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm not an expert in that field, but I am an expert in seeing the same, criminals arrested again and again. And that's definitely something we want to change,
Yep.
and that kind of speaks to another bill that I also don't think got a lot of attention, but it was a bill that allows the state's prosecution period for sex offenses to kind of be restarted if there's new evidence. So right now, I think it's like 3 years, and once we hit that 3 year window, and I hope I'm right about that date. I think I am. You know, time's expired. That's it. It's done. No more investigation. You kind of have reached your limit. But now, if new evidence comes out, photos or videos, if it comes to light, police are now allowed to kind of reopen that. And I think that's so important. And I'm curious what your
It
thoughts are as
is.
a female, because females don't always report these right away. And we've interviewed the victim in Walker that was sexually assaulted.
Yep.
And I keep thinking like how long it took her and how brave she was to kind of come forward, and sometimes it takes time. And I think this bill is going to be great for victims of sexual abuse.
Well, and sadly, there are those women who have falsely made up accusations. So I think as a woman, you feel like, oh, you're going to be labeled as, oh, well, she was asking for it. Somehow you're going to be the one who is led to believe that, well, it's kind of your fault. So a woman so often just waits and waits and waits. In the case that you're talking about, Daniel, I think she was 12 or 14, 12. She was 12 years old when the alleged rape happened. That's a child. It takes everything in you to even speak up. 3 years later, when she was brave enough to speak up at 15, her mom brought her to me. She asked her mom to leave. Her mom was not allowed to be anywhere there. It was me and her, and I had to stop that camera multiple times because she just kept crying and crying and crying. That was 3 years later. When you've been through something so horrific, that will never leave you. You will relive that. So every time you tell that story, you relive it. Think about one of the worst things that's happened to
Yeah.
you. It can be a termination, it can be a loss of a loved one. In our day-to-day life, you might not be remember you may not be able to sit here and say, "Did I take a shower today?" But go back 10 years to your mama passing away, you will remember that phone call.
Yeah, that's very true. Especially when you think of it like that. You don't always
Yep.
kind of put it in those terms, but that's so true.
Yep.
The one thing about the special session, and we'll move on to the next topic, that I didn't like, I will say, about the special session, was, a lot of these bills were pushed through fast. Like this was a very
Very.
quick special session, and that's kind of the point of a special session, is to move things along quickly. The governor had an agenda. He got to check off that agenda. He's a big winner when it comes to this. But a lot of the bills were rushed. And you're hearing a lot of independent watchdogs kind of talk about that. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if some of the bills that pass, how they hold up, if some of them are amended. I know there were some that didn't kind of make it through the process that they're going to get brought up during the regular session here in a few weeks. So it's definitely more to watch on that. But I
For
will
sure.
say that transparency was it was a big loss here for this session. And I think as journalists, transparency is huge. It's something that we believe in. So I think that was something that was missed. But yeah, I think the state is definitely moving forward when it comes to criminal justice, and it's what Landry ran on. So I mean,
Yep.
he's
He
kind of
made it very
accomplished.
clear.
Yeah, he's accomplished like 95% of the things that he campaigned on. So he's definitely enjoying the honeymoon phase of being the new governor.
And you know what's weird, Daniel? That me as a reporter, when we every morning we decide what we're doing, I think when you guys told me, oh, this has already happened, that's already happened, I'm thinking, wait, what? Because I was comparing it to regular session
Yeah.
timing. So things move a lot slower in regular session. And even the day it was over, I had to ask one of our other reporters, like, oh, wait, it ended today? I thought it was going to end on Friday. Like everything just felt like it happened so fast.
Yeah, and look, lawmakers, in this case, they were Republican lawmakers, but it's not really a partisan argument. But they were allowed to push their agendas through by suspending certain rules. So they were able to kind of bypass committees, and that move things along a little quickly. So it's strategic. It will
Yep.
be interesting during the regular session. It's going to be tougher for the governor. The honeymoon phase is going to end for him. He does enjoy a Republican majority in the House and Senate. So it's definitely he'll be running the show, if you will. But it will be interesting if he gets more pushback. Politics in Louisiana is never dull, and I can't wait to see how it plays out in the regular session.
I do want to add on concealed carry, the permitless. I know we did a whole episode on it last time. You had two former Baton Rouge police chiefs on opposite ends of it. But prime example to kind of going to what you said, that you have a Republican governor, Republican lead in the House and the Senate. When it came to concealed carry, it was pretty much a done deal. There was no need to even go through the House and Senate. And he had already said when it ends up on his desk, he is signing it. So that just goes to prove what
Yeah.
Daniel was just saying.
And look, that was a bill too that it was no surprise that it got brought up. It was no surprise that it got passed. And I think that most people in Louisiana are in favor of the bill. I will say the only pushback, and we heard this last week here on Louisiana Unfiltered, was the lack of training. I think is the only kind of big
Yeah.
holdup. Like the fact that you've never held a gun, you've never shot a gun, but you can go purchase a gun and carry that gun. I think that's where some people, even pro gun, opponents, I feel like that's where some of them are a little uneasy. I know I am. I grew up with guns. I always tell the story that we were taught to respect the gun, and not everyone's taught that. But I
No.
remember having a BB gun. If my dad went behind you and that BB gun was not on safety, I mean, you got in trouble. I mean, you couldn't do what he did to us today like he did then, but we never left that gun off safety again.
Exactly.
So I learned to respect guns. Not everyone did, and that's the only part of the legislation that I'm just kind of like, ugh.
And I mean, I stressed this last week and I'll stress it again. I highly, highly, highly recommend go get your proper training and make sure you go through training with somebody who's actually certified. What those
Yeah,
chiefs both told me is anybody can go get their certification in
yes,
24 hours. So do your research as to who you use. But the concealed carry class that I went through, I mean, I learned how to properly hold it, how to
yeah.
disassemble it, how to clean it.
Mount
And
yourself, yeah.
yes, but then I shot with that. So now when I go to the range, I'm actually comfortable holding a gun
Yeah.
and shooting it. But a gun is not a toy.
Well said. And even if it's not required, I hope people still do that training. I think it's important.
Yes, please.
And last year, Kieran, is another case that I want to talk about, and this one will. I mean, it's a punch in the gut when you hear some of the details, and not all the details that publicly came out.
No.
We've unfortunately heard a bunch of them, but it's the parents of the girl who died basically after melting into the couch.
Lacey Fletcher.
Lacey Fletcher.
So this happened in East Feliciana Parish, and Lacey Fletcher pretty much was left on the couch for years. And there's so many questions on this. Wait, did she live in the same home? Yes. Wait, so her parents walked by her every single day? I'm pretty sure yes.
Allegedly, that's what they're arguing. Yes.
And it's tough. What? I
And
mean,
the
that's
parents claim that there's more to the story, that that's not exactly what happened, that she was a woman, she wasn't a little girl, and she could have taken care of herself, right? That's like their
yep,
argument in this case.
yep.
But we do know that there's even more to that story, because like how can someone be of right mind and an able body and live in their own waste, live in their own urine, covered in maggots, melting into a couch? And I've seen the picture of that couch in the unedited version. I mean, melt it into the couch.
And she weighed 96 pounds. So imagine that. And yes, maggots on her body. And Daniel, I'll even add this through my sources, I've learned that there were family members of the parents who never knew they had a child. How's that happen?
I don't. There's so many things about this case, and I know this will be a spoiler alert, but we are working on more on this case, and the
Yes.
more I hear about it, the more I feel like this woman was just failed all the way around. Like she was just failed. I mean,
Yep.
she she died in, it was 2022 and she passed away, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
They believe that she was on that couch since 2010.
Yes.
So 12
12
years
years.
of
Yep.
never leaving the couch, multiple infections. She had COVID. So, her death was not pleasant. Not that any
No.
death is, but it wasn't she passed away in her sleep kind of death here. Like, she died in a brutal, brutal way.
It sounds agonizing. And so many of our listeners are parents, if not parents, your step parents. Or I'll even go so far to say this: I couldn't even do that to my dog. My
No.
dog is my child, and he is treated as royally as it comes. And I don't understand this. I know you got to be unbiased as a reporter. You have to be unbiased, and
Yeah.
I do want to make sure I say that. So March the 20th, Clay and Sheila Fletcher have their sentencing. At that time, I'm told that a lot more will come out after it, should I say. So both the mom and dad have chose not to go to trial. Instead, they pleaded no contest to manslaughter. And we were corrected on that, Daniel, because
We
we went
were
with guilty to
not guilty.
manslaughter.
Yeah.
They did
Oh,
not
guilty, yes.
plead they did not plead guilty, which to me doesn't make sense. How do you plead no contest
It's
but two?
basically saying, the way I understand it, that they're not saying they didn't do it, but they're not saying they did it. It's one of those legal kind of workarounds, um, that they can that they have the right to kind of plead, and it was accepted. It was
It
accepted by
was.
the prosecution and the judge. Like, it was something accepted, and
Well, and
that
the
their legal case has also been kind of murky at best. Like, they were, you know charged twice by a grand jury. One indictment that was handed down had to be overturned because of a technicality. They were
yep,
re-indicted on the same charge. Um, and then this. So, even the legal process in this, I feel like, has failed Lacey in a lot of ways.
agreed. And so the charge of manslaughter, the maximum is 40 years. So that's why on the date of the sentencing, I've been told that it'll be one of those where they're going to have to decide, well, do we give them the maximum of 40 years? Obviously, their defense attorney is Steve Moore. He's not going to want 40 years. He's going to do everything in
Yeah.
his power to make sure that they don't get 40 years. And he has told me there is more to the story. What that more is, I don't know.
And
Nobody has
I'm
opened their mouth.
I'm impatiently waiting to kind of hear their justification for this, because what's being laid out so far, not good.
No.
Right now, I wish this was a conviction after August 1st, so there's no parole. So, that new law can take effect, if you will. But, I'm anxious to see what happens in court, because I do want to hear their side. I think it's going to be public opinion whether we believe him or
Oh,
not.
agreed.
The coroner, though, when you hear him talk about the case, and
Oh,
we've heard him a few times talk about it, this is a coroner who's around, dead people every single day. For him to say that in his career, and he's
this
been
is the
doing this
worst case he's ever
a long
handled.
time, it's the
Yeah.
worst case he's ever handled. Like,
He told me that on the phone. And
it's hard to wrap
go
your mind
I'll go
around
ahead
that.
and say it. Spoiler alert. We were trying to line up doing a full episode on this case to
Yeah.
delve into it deeper, but the judge in the case has actually issued a gag order. And for those of you who don't know what that means, basically you cannot discuss the case to others and the media specifically. So from the coroner to the DA to the prosecution, defense,
Yeah.
everybody basically shut your mouth. You can't say anything. So now we wait till sentencing, and that is scheduled on March the 20th.
And as much as I hate that, I do think that it's fair. I
It
want
is.
the parents to have a fair sentencing. I don't want there to be any question at the end of what happened. But we talked to experts, Kieran, medical experts, and I mean, Lacey had bed sores to her bone. Like,
Yes.
that doesn't happen in a day. It doesn't happen in a week. It doesn't happen in a month. Like,
Maggots don't happen in a day.
maggots don't happen in a day. So the things that Lacey went through, and I want to say her name because I don't want her to be forgotten in all this, is just unbelievable. And I don't care what the excuse or the situation is. Like, no one deserves that.
Agreed.
No one deserves that.
And like you said, the parents deserve their day in court. I guess me, take off the reporter hat, take off the journalist hat. As a human being, I want to hear from these parents. Like, how do you
Hmm.
explain yourself? If explain is too harsh of a word, that hey, I don't owe the public an explanation. what do you say for yourself? We've never heard them talk. They lawyered up as fast as they could from the very beginning. It was pretty much a done deal. They're going to come into court, they're going to do this, their bond is preset, and then they're leaving out. So from the very beginning, they've never said anything.
I would love to hear their side of the story. I know we'll hear some of it in court, but I would love to hear it in their own words and to be able to question them on that because there are
Yep.
so many questions in this.
Yep, and I'll tell you this, that you already know this, but I promise to be at that sentencing hearing, and we will be reporting on it extensively.
There's going to be a lot of media there, my friend. I know last
Oh,
time they were in court, like Daily Mail or some crazy
yes.
was there. It's this is getting a lot of attention now.
Yeah, it's a big national story. I mean, we've covered a lot of crime. You and
Yeah.
I, in our time, we've covered some various crazy cases from serial killers to a little bit of everything. I don't know if I've ever in my life covered a child dying. I say child, I'm sorry, a
Yeah.
young woman dying after she was left on the couch.
Doesn't happen every day, and thank goodness it doesn't because
And
it's horrific. It's
it is,
horrific.
and it's right in our backyard. People, Daniel, I've always been told that Baton Rouge has some crazy news. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. And for those of you, I know we have listeners in Australia and Europe, you are probably at this very point saying, where is Baton Rouge, Louisiana? We're about 90 miles west of New Orleans. I know everybody knows where that is for Mardi Gras and whatnot, but yeah, for being the small city we are, I say small, the capital of Louisiana, there is a tremendous amount of crime and local connections to even national stories that happens right here in Baton Rouge.
But there's a lot of good, and we tell them those
Yes,
stories
there
too.
is. Yes, there
Yes.
is. Like, I just want to round out real quick a soft, sweet story of
Yeah.
what the basketball yesterday that just warmed my heart. That
My alma
the
mater. Yeah.
Oh, well, hey, hey. So you had the winning team
Yeah.
instead of going around, and this is high school basketball, instead of going around screaming and yelling and celebrating their win,
Yeah.
which rightfully they have every right to do that, they ended up consoling the losing team and just hugged on him. It was, there is good in this world.
There is good in this world, and that story made me so proud. You know, Donaldsonville won the right to go to the state championship. They were fighting against top seed French Element. French Element lost. It was the Lions and the Tigers at battle. The Lions lost. The Tigers won. It was a senior, Maxwell Allison. Really devastated by the loss. Very emotional, crying on the court. Picked up, consoled by the winning team, and if that doesn't scream sportsmanship and that there is good in this world and that not all kids are bad, it's that story. And I'm so
Yep.
glad we got to tell that story because it's a good one.
Yep. Yep. Well, we're going to go ahead and round out this episode. And these are just some of the stories we've delved into. Of course, if you don't have our app, make sure you download that, Unfiltered with Kiran. It's on the Apple Store and the Google Store. As always, please subscribe. Please follow us for the podcast. That is Louisiana Unfiltered. Make sure you please leave us your reviews. And we are also going ahead and getting a Patreon set up. We're going to have that coming up for you in the coming weeks. Again, I just want to thank you guys. We are still new to this, so we appreciate being accepted with open arms, but we are absolutely open to any advice you have, anything that you like. Please make sure you send that our way. We thank you for joining us for this episode of Louisiana Unfiltered. We will see you next time.